Good morning and welcome to Morning Moments. I am so glad that you came to join us today. I have another filmmaker. I have a lot of filmmakers on. This filmmaker, Kasim Hafeez, is a filmmaker that he's produced a documentary that talks about the Holocaust, talks about pro-Israel. It talks about a lot of great things, and he's a wonderful gentleman and has done a great work, and he's going to tell you about the film. And it's Never Again. What a great film that was. My wife and I absolutely enjoyed it. Kasim, welcome to Morning Moments.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So I'm going to ask you, what do you do and why do you do it?
My title, my job title is a Middle East analyst, senior Middle East analyst, whatever that means. But I was involved in the making of this documentary that you referenced, Never Again, which talks about the Holocaust, talks about modern day anti-Semitism and bigotry, and essentially makes the connection through myself and my dear friend Irving Roth, who sadly passed away last year, how that old hatred which caused the Holocaust hasn't disappeared, how it didn't just appear miraculously. The Holocaust just didn't happen, as Irving would frequently say. It started with words. It started with dehumanization. It started with all these things. And while that happened in 1939, I, born in 1983 in England, had these anti-Semitic attitudes and extremist views that still are prevalent today.
And it starts with, like you said in the film, it starts with words, isn't it? It's just a simple thing of how words can destroy.
Right. And that's so important to remember, because people sometimes ask me, how could you have these views that you were justifying violence against Jews or anyone in the West who I saw as a quote unquote enemy? But if you're told something repeatedly from the age of 5 or 6, that no longer becomes just, you don't see it as hatred or bigotry, it's just your reality. And that can be a very difficult cycle to break.
Yeah. And when you're a child, and one of the things I loved about the film, it talked about children and how children are affected by what your parents say and the hatred in your parents, and it happens with so easily done, and it's so hate is passed on so much easier sometimes than love.
Right. And I think that's the important thing. As we were discussing before we started taping, I grew up Muslim and I became very extreme. And then I changed my views, which is discussed in the documentary. And now, I became a Christian. And there are so many things that resonate. The Bible talks about the power of life and death in words. And it's more true than we realize. Sometimes we look at these things and go, oh, that has value with gossip and things like that, and completely. But in actuality, if you're constantly poisoning the ears and minds of your children, what is going to be the result of that? And we're seeing that globally throughout the world with terrorism and extremism and all these evil things.
This film brings a light to what the world looked at and still does, of what the thoughts of Jews and the Jewish nation is. And you've done a real work at trying to bring that to light.
Right. Because it's so important. I mean, being from a background where, I was propagating hatred based on lies. Growing up, I didn't know anybody Jewish. My family had very limited interactions with anyone Jewish because we're from Pakistan. We're not from the Middle East. So for me, having experienced it firsthand and seeing the error of my ways, if there is anybody, even one person, and this is what it will always come down to me, for me, if there's one person who is going down a similar path to me, has that hatred and poison in their heart, if I can shine a little bit of light there, then it's been worth it.
When we were talking earlier about my wife and our background with children ministry, so often, if you can get the heart of a child to change their thinking, that God is a God of love. He really cares for you. He's got a plan and a hope for your life, even though life's journey may take you a lot of different ways. That message doesn't will stay with you.
100%, because it becomes so ingrained in that formative time, and whatever message that children are receiving, it becomes very deeply ingrained. For me, growing up with anti-Semitic messages in the background or being talked about, it wasn't something I recited daily, but when I was a teenager, I connected those dots. Those messages became more vocal in myself and made me gravitate towards extremist groups and anti-Semitic groups. And it's a key point that you raised there.
There's so much to say about this, but in a short interview, it's really hard to say it, but I can't express enough the importance of people to getting a hold of this video, this documentary. It's we had a chance to do a sneak preview of it, and it's really amazing. And you interviewed a gentleman, and you told me that he's gone last year, but he was a survivor of the Holocaust, and told his story during that filming, right?
Yeah, Irving shared his story, and he was he was in Auschwitz as a child, and I think today it's so important to hear what he has to say and the process and steps leading up to it, and just the humanizing of it. I think the Holocaust was a tragedy, but we have a tendency to see it as abstract. We see it as figures and numbers and Auschwitz and Dachau. But these were actual human lives which were impacted. These were actual human lives and families which were torn apart. And Irving's story is just one of millions. So, and I think it's so important that we internalize that. We need to learn about the humans behind the numbers, and that's so important.
I've talked to so many filmmakers that say there's such a this it's important to understand the story and let the story be told and make a record of it. And that's also what you've done too, is captured. Here's this gentleman who's died last year, but you've captured his story on film, and
Right.
that's important for history's sake, isn't it?
No, 100%. And that was a lot of the thinking when this project initially was visualized, that we wanted to make sure that Irving's story was immortalized. So what he was teaching and his message didn't end with him, that it inspires and educates generations in the future.
We're going to put down below the links and where it's going to be seen, how to get a hold of that. Also, other things that you're doing and other links that the people can get a hold of. This isn't the only project you've done, other projects. Yeah. And that's important. But I want also folks, when they hear this, to think about the challenge and the risk that you took, even just to make this film. And that my audience right now, wherever you're at, whatever platform you're at, would stop and pray right now for you, that God would continue to bless you, to be with you, protect you, and also to make have favor wherever you go.
I mean, prayers are always appreciated, and yeah, it's been challenging. There have been many challenges. So yeah, no, like I said, I grew up in England, and it just became so difficult with the community I grew up in. Once I essentially said, look, this is not the way, this is wrong, it eventually led to me moving to Canada and then the US. So
yeah, there's a price to pay for standing up for truth, isn't there?
There is. And it's very easy for me to look back and go, well, it was the right thing to do, and but it was. Ultimately, we're all accountable for what we do, and our time here is limited. We all have the power to make the world a little bit better, however that may be in our own home, our community, our city. So when that opportunity presents itself.
Is there any closing thoughts, anything you would like to leave my audience about, one thing that you would like to just share?
I think if anything, it would be to, actually, if I could take two things. One, it would be to see themselves the way God sees them.
Yeah.
because we always talk about when Jesus said, love thy neighbor like you love yourself. And I feel we're in society at the moment, one of the biggest challenges is we don't see ourselves the way God sees us. And if we can't see ourselves the way God sees us, how are we going to care about our neighbor? Which I think is a huge, and just tying into that, we all have the ability to make positive change, be it in our own home, our city, community, wherever we can make positive, tangible changes, because we look at the world and it always seems like so overwhelming. So I would just say you can make a change, you can make the world better. Just don't look at it in these grand terms that are overwhelming, and look at it what's in front of you, and that will essentially lay out your path forward.
Yeah, I think about God wanting us to be world changers. That also means to be our world changers. And we
Right.
all have the world in which we live in our own environment. And it needs to start there.
No, 100%. It's, you take the first steps and God will guide you.
You got to watch this film, folks. You gotta get a hold of it. We're gonna put the information down, and it's one of those things you need to pass on. So this interview here needs to also be passed on to some people, and you may need to hear it and say, you know what, I want to pass this on to somebody else. Please do so, and remember both of us in your prayers. I always say you need the prayer, and we need the prayer and you need the practice. That's important. And so if you would just continue to be praying for us and keep coming back for some more morning moments, and God bless you.